Okay, this video is going to introduce us to just the beginning of being able to generate random numbers. This is textbook 4.10, and we're on page 12 of our notes. Generating random numbers. So we want to be able to write programs that would generate random numbers, and they can be especially useful in a couple of things. And so one of those things would be simulation programs. They're especially useful in what they call simulation programs. That would be things where they simulate an activity in the real world or an imaginary one. Simulations are commonly used for predicting climate change, analyzing traffic, picking stocks, and other applications in science and business and so forth. And so in many of these simulations, one or more loops are used to modify the state of a system and observe the changes. So in simulations, they use these random numbers to be able to predict things that will be happening in real life type thing. And so they're also useful in creating games. And so we'll see that. We'll most likely practice a little bit of that ourselves this week. Now the Java library has a random number generator. So somebody wrote a program and put it in the Java library. It's available to us because we have Java downloaded or installed on our computers. And so we have access to that. And so what we do is we call the math. Let me see. I can type this. It might make it easier. So we call the math.random method. Oops. The math.random method, and what that does is it pulls from the Java library somehow, and it generates a decimal number from 0 to less than 1. So it generates a decimal, and maybe we don't need number in there, but it generates a decimal that's from 0 to less than 1. So it doesn't include 1, doesn't generate a 1. And so what happens if we look at this, what I should have had you do is you're supposed to open up random numbers intro.java from the module from day 1 of this week's module, week 15. So you need to open up that. And now what I'd like you to do is type this in because your program doesn't have everything in it. So what we want to do is type in the things that we need to be able to generate a random number. And then I would like you to see what happens when you compile it and run it. And so the first thing that you should type in here, so again, make sure that you have random numbers intro in there. And I have a different name on mine, but yours should be random numbers intro.java. And add in the code that we need for that. And so we have a variable count, which means that we're going to write a definite loop that we want to be able to run. We're going to run this loop 10 times. We want 10 random numbers is what we want. So we're going to use a definite loop, a for loop, to create that. And we're declaring a variable that's going to store the decimal in there. And so go ahead and write your for loop in there. So type your for loop. Okay, so hopefully you got your for loop written in there. And so we have count from 1 to 10. So it's going to go through the loop 10 times. And each time through the loop, it's going to print a random number. So math.random, what that does is calls the random method in the Java library, and it produces a random decimal that goes from 0 to less than 1. And it's going to store it in random. And so then we're going to print the value of random so you can see what it does, what it's printing. And actually, and what this is going to do, this is just going to be the start, because now we're going to use that as a base for creating random integers. But right now it's just random decimals is at the base of it. And so then if we compile this and then run it, you'll see that you have random numbers, just decimals, and they're all different. They're somewhat random. And if you were to run it again, it's going to give you another set of numbers that aren't the same. And so that's the idea. So on your notes then, what I need you to do is to fill in this code here in number 4 based on what we just did. And then in our next class, then we'll start dealing with code for generating random numbers from 1 to 10. So we're not going to do that yet. So just get number 4 filled out and make sure that you keep the code that we just typed, and then we'll use that as we go forward. And that's it for tonight.